territories. That was the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths. Once these three were taken out, they had supreme power. Notice that when pagan Rome rose to world dominion, it had to conquer the three areas, Egypt, Syria, and Judea. When papal Rome rose, it had to conquer the three nations, Heruli, Vandals, and Ostrogoths. And modern Babylon also has to conquer three areas, the king of the south, the glorious land, and Egypt, which we find in verses 40 and 41. Here we see a transition of paganism to papalism. Pagan Rome achieved four things. Army stands up for the papacy. It helped to pollute the sanctuary by removing its power and base from Rome to Constantinople. It helped to remove the daily, which was paganism, and it sets up the papacy as king of the earth. Now, whenever the subject of the daily comes up, most people make reference to the daily in reference to Daniel chapter 8, but they never seem to make reference to Daniel chapter 11 verses 30 and 31 and Daniel chapter 12 verses 11. Here, when you find and study what the pioneers taught, they taught that this daily was paganism, and that it was pagan Rome. When the daily was removed, it was paganism being removed, and in its stead was papalism, which is called the transgression of desolation. The wrong view of the daily will cause the following. 1. The 2,300-year prophecy to fail. The question in Daniel chapter 8 is, how long shall the daily and the transgression of desolation tread and trample upon God's people? And the answer is the 2,300-year prophecy. If we accept that the daily is Christ's heavenly ministry, when did Christ go into heaven? The earliest Christ would have gone into heaven would have been AD 31. If you take 2,300 years from AD 31, it does not give us 1844. 2. It removes the 508 AD as the starting point for Daniel 12 verse 11 and reinterpretations for the 1290 and 1335 year prophecies, which we are now seeing amongst modern day speakers. Yet Ellen White tells us that there shall be time no longer, or there should be no more prophecies in relation to time. 3. To miss the repeat in history in verses 40 to 45. So if we have a wrong understanding of the daily, we will not understand correctly the repetition of history in verses 40 to 45. And we're also told in the book Early Writings, page 74, that the wrong view of the daily causes us to be in darkness. Verse 32 to 33. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. This is describing the 1260 years of papal rule from 538 AD to 1798. Here we are shown the church in the wilderness, the true believers who had to flee to the mountains in those days. It says in verse 32 that they knew their God. And here we see a correlation with Revelation chapter 12 when the church goes into the wilderness. Verses 34 and 35. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Here we see the 1260-year period ended in 1798. There is a time appointed. They were helped with the start of the Reformation, but some renounced the faith under persecution and lies and flatteries. And we're told that there were over 100 million martyrs. Jesus said in Matthew 24:22, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Again, it was the Reformation that shortened those days. Also, we find in these verses that the USA opens up an asylum. In Revelation chapter 12, we find that this dragon, that water comes out of this dragon like a flood, and yet the earth opens up to absorb this flood of water. And we're told in the book Great Controversy and our pioneers that God used America to open up its earth to protect the Protestants. The time of the end, 1798, is the end of the 1260 reign, 42 months, time, and the dividing of time. Verse 36 and 37. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. The papacy, is it not magnifying himself above every god to tell the people to ignore God's holy word and obey him instead? Calling himself the one who speaks for God on this earth, this power certainly speaks against the God of gods, God on earth having power to forgive sins. The desire of women, which likely refers to Christ, as faithful women down through history until the birth of Jesus, longed to be the one chosen to be the mother of the Messiah. The papacy shows Jesus nearly always either as a cookie in a box or a monstrance, a baby in Mary's arms, or hanging dead on the cross. He shall continue in this attitude until the indignation be accomplished. What is this indignation? In Daniel chapter 8 verse 19, it reads this: And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed, the end shall be. If there is a last end of the indignation, there has to be a first end of the indignation. In the book of Daniel, we won't have time to deal with it now, but there is a reference to the time prophecy, the 2520 time prophecy. We have reference to it in Daniel chapter 9 verse 13 with reference to Moses. And Moses gave the curses and the blessings, and as part of the curses, if God's people would forsake God, then God would punish them 7 times. On the 1843 chart and the 1850 chart that the pioneers produced, there is reference to this 2520 time prophecy. Higher medicine also identified this time prophecy in relation to the northern tribes of Israel, whereas William Miller identified it to the southern tribes of Israel. Higher medicine took this time prophecy and it ended in 1798, which was the first end of the indignation. William Miller took the end date of the 2520 to ending in 1844, which in Daniel chapter 8 verse 19 shows us is the last end of the indignation. If you get a copy of the DVD Pathway of the Pioneers, I have an explanation of this 2520 time prophecy. He shall continue this attitude until the indignation be accomplished. What is this indignation? We find it Daniel chapter 8 verse 19. So this power will continue to exalt and magnify himself and do according to his own will until the time of the end, 1798, then ultimately destroyed in the 7 last plagues. Verse 38, But in his estate shall he honour the God of forces, and the God whom his fathers knew not shall he honour with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. This refers to Babylonian worship. Papalism takes the characteristics of Babylon. Examples would be the Mary and the Christ images, mother and child worship we find in Babylonian worship. There's a whole subject which we don't have time to cover today, which parallels the worship style that the Babylonians did to the current worship style of Catholicism. Verse 39, Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. The papacy ruled from Rome and causes all to honour false worship. The clergy have great power and control